Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to PA's Perpetual Testing. Today we're looking at reorientation and recovery, which is a map by yours truly. A while ago, and in a couple of videos back, I said I would remake a map by Deathwish808, who had challenged me to do so after I said that it was pretty terrible. Well, I didn't say that directly, but I had some choice words about it, and that I thought I could make it better, and I could remove some of the frustrating elements, and so this came to be. It does not have a drop with a turret here because I actually ran out of testing elements near the end of things, but the maps is still mostly the same. I took detailed notes on how to complete each test chamber and try to make the feel remain identical. So first things first, I wanted to make absolutely sure that the player noticed the wall and noticed exactly what they have to do to get to it. There are 3 cube buttons here, which means you're going to need the 3 cubes from up above to get into there. And while it's not directly stated, there is a path behind this sphere button which does activate the door. So the player can assume that they're going to have to get the cubes to place on there to get the sphere on there to exit. So simple enough there. Now you are stuck in a hole with nothing to get you out yet. So you have to walk up these stairs onto here, a platform which raises you up, and immediately you're looking at test chamber number 1, indicated by the light. The order of the test chambers remains indicated by the lights above them, and the test chambers do remain single, undisturbed entities. So if the player sees test chamber 1 and attempts to jump straight in, they'll find that they can't actually make it. It's a hole in the ground, and they have no area where they're able to portal up. So they wander back here naturally, trying to find a way out, and lo and behold, portalable surfaces on the roof and a portalable surface here. You're able to jump straight back out, you're able to get started again, and once more, this actually used to be a deadly test, or a deadly part of the test, so now it is, in my opinion, a little bit better for the fact that you can no longer just die by failing a jump or failing to reach test chamber 1. The method for getting to test chamber 1 is still a fling through 2 different portals. I made it so there's a second one just for the sake of consistency, plus I think it looks pretty nice, and it makes sure that the player sees these and the portals right next to them right away. Pretty much guarantees that they're going to head to the first test chamber. Plus, it's the only one that they can actually make progress in. While it is possible to get in here, very slightly, it is impossible to get to the other side. It's impossible to actually jump up. So if you tried to get into test chamber 2, you would not be able to do so. Test chamber 3 is a little bit different, and can no longer be challenged at any point. That should have been a cube button. It's still fine, it works without, but test chamber 3 is locked off until you get 1 cube to place on the button, and test chamber 4, while not immediately locked off, is impossible to complete without 2 more cubes. So, you'll find that it is completely impossible to progress anywhere but in the very first test chamber. So we're going to place our portals here and fling into the room. Blue portal, and you fly. Both of my portals are arranged so you'll go straight into the excursion funnels because excursion funnels are fun, and the sphere is kept in place by a small pull funnel right here. This keeps it from rolling away. It was a trick I saw in a map a couple of days ago, and I really like the look of it. It does require an extra part and a bit of clicking sounds, but it does work out. A similar excursion funnel puts the cube on that button, and then if the player attempts to get out through the same means, the means they used earlier, they will find that their panel has locked and they are completely unable to get out. Turning around, they can just go through the flip panel here and get back out. So, the only way to get across, as in the original map, is to use an excursion funnel unlocked at this time. Unlike the original map, this is not the same excursion funnel that is used in the rest of the test chamber. There are multiple ones. I found the single one, while clever, to be a bit clunky, so I decided to do something about it. Next, you'll go in here. You'll notice there is a single panel that remains active. This is actually, well, 2 things. This is by choice, and it's necessary for the test chamber to work. So, you're just going to be able to get over there by portaling in. I could have placed a portalable surface over there, but it did make things a little bit more difficult to, or a little bit easier to get around with the cube. And we're back into test chamber number 2. Now this one underwent some significant overhaul. The cube no longer drops in an area where you can't really see it, and the ability to get into the chamber now is actually dictated by the cube being on that button. If the cube is not on that button, you will see that the emancipation field reactivates. However, you can't just leave it to its own devices, as, well, first off, whenever it respawns, it'll just press on the button again, allowing you to get back in. And as with the original test, if you press the button to engage the excursion funnel to get the cube out from where it is and get it to you, you have only a couple of seconds to grab it before it'll be destroyed. So, you take this cube, and then, as with the trick we learned from Solid Gym and execute in the original map, you just move it around the edge like this. Now, this part of the test chamber was actually pretty simple originally, and I never really had anything to do with it. The closest approximation I could come to, and the easiest way to make sure that the player hit the correct one square, was to place the portal here. Now, the player has a couple of options here. They can attempt to, and obviously the excursion funnel that was normally from test chamber, or from the middle of the test chamber, is now actually in this test chamber. Once again, using the same one was clever, but ultimately felt too clunky and just a bit too hard to reach, so multiple excursion funnels are just a bit easier to use. So, here, if the player presses the button and then they place their blue portal here, they can fling the cube, but they'll soon find that that merely puts it back into the excursion funnel. So, that'll pretty much just ruin the chances the player has of getting out of the chamber. They have to instead wait for this to go all the way up, as usual. And then once it's past that door, press the button, put their orange portal here instead, and allow the excursion funnel to carry it out through the small hole in the gap that has been created. There is a limited time to do this, and the time is actually pretty much, or pretty closely aligned, so the player has to place the portal almost immediately, or the panel will either be too soon and they won't be able to place their portal there, so it won't be able to start flying. But if they don't do it immediately, there might not be enough time for it to get through the emancipation grid. So, the player actually does have to just exit by using the portals on the floor for this one. I wish I could have made it more clever, but I did run out of tools. I actually am at the item limit, I believe, in the portal editor in this map. So the next test chamber 3, was originally a jumping puzzle. At least I think it was 3. I might have mixed up the order of 3 and 4. It was originally a jumping puzzle in which the player had to go above 2 jumps above a deadly surface to be able to get through. The 2 jumps have become considerably more, and the deadly surface is no longer deadly. The cube was going to there was going to be something within this test chamber where the cube had to be brought across by jumping back across, but once again, item limits, there were going to be emancipation grids across the way there. So once the player presses the button after they've gotten across, it does 2 things. 1, it activates a quick return, and 2, it deactivates the emancipation grid. That, too, is actually a separate emancipation grid, should have been deactivated, but was not. Again, this is a preliminary effort. Apologies for any and all errors. So now we have 2 different types of cube. We have both reflection cube and just plain old weighted storage cube. So, we now have the tools that we need to get the 4th one. The 4th chamber in the original map was completed by pushing this with an excursion funnel onto a button. Oh, I just did the wrong thing. Okay. Put that over there. However, this solution felt ultimately a bit too simple, so I decided to mix the map up a bit. Now, this panel is actually controlled by one of the cubes you received from the previous test chambers. This was also what happened in one of the originals, but in that, the 4 buttons were actually in the center of the chamber and controlled a lot more without being entirely clear. The outline on the floor guarantees that the player knows that that's what that is for, and the fact that it has to be a cube communicates the fact that the player is not going to be able to do this until they have one. The fact that there's an R-cube button over there guarantees that chamber 4 has to be the 4th one they visit. So, once the player has activated this, they'll see the excursion funnel in this room, as well as an excursion funnel over there that is activated by this button. If the player puts one of their cubes into this room, they'll be able to simply wait a moment while it travels over, and once it hits the button, it will activate the activate the excursion funnel for the companion cube, allowing it to fly through and eventually allowing it to get into the regular test chamber with the rest of the tools. Putting your portal elsewhere will deactivate the excursion funnel, will deactivate the button, will cause the cube to fall. So, you now have a cube locked in here. You have a couple of options. You can just go retrieve it from the second test chamber, definitely an option if you were to somehow destroy it. But, easier than that, the player can simply return with the cube. The cube was going to be drawn back in per the original test, but again, I've run out of items. So some of the tests had to be simplified slightly to make them less frustrating and less deadly. However, I believe that the ultimate effect is that the test is a little bit more comprehensible, hopefully. So we're just going to toss all of our cubes into the main room over here, following which we should be able to enter the final area. Now, if you recall, in the final area previously, you had to grab the cube that you had been using to reach the other test chambers and activate the excursion funnel and use it to exit the chamber. However, as you can see, now the only thing requiring us to exit the chamber is a sphere, which is still the tool we received in Chamber 1 rather than a Franken-cube. So you can head over here, there's nothing you can do without the sphere. However, if you head around this way, you'll find that there is an elevator in a single solitary almost a back room to the chamber, which I think came with the feeling of the original, that there was a single, push that put you up into the first chamber once more. The button that we saw at the very beginning through this glass window is now activated, allowing us to get this sphere out of here, which does deactivate quite a bit in the original chamber, but allows us to get through back to the button that we had. So jumping back down here and placing the sphere on the button opens the door, allowing the player to exit once they've headed through here. If somehow one of the cubes has fallen off by this point, it is still possible to exit through the sphere chamber using the method that we actually saw at the very beginning of the game. Like, if for some reason this was actually like falling off gradually as you entered here and that locked up afterwards, you'd still be able to travel through to Chamber 1 and exit that way. So I don't believe there's any way for the player to get actively stuck within this test chamber. If there are errors and I need to fix them. However, once you've gotten the sphere and once you've placed it on the button, you are able to exit without issue. There is no possibility that the player can die in this test chamber, barring significant error on my part or a bug I'm not aware of. So I think that this fixes a lot of the problems that I had with the original chamber. It did have to sacrifice a couple of basic, basically the return solutions, like get the cube back or send the player back, in exchange for not having deadly solutions or having just a bit more to the test chamber or having it look a bit different. I also like the fact that all the test chambers feel very different, in my opinion. You've got the one which is just the sphere moving, but that's pretty much the exact same as it was with the Franken-cube. Sphere, move it onto the button and then exit. The second, and that one has its feeling because it has just two very basic tools, activate one, using the other, leave. The second test chamber has a black and white sort of thing going on. One side is completely unportable, the other side is largely portable, which is actually fairly cool, I think. The third one is a jumping puzzle that is entirely unportable, making it just absolutely clear that you are on your own for this one. There is nothing you can do. And the last test chamber is a bit of an interesting one, since the player can go over to the other side. However, the cube button makes it abundantly clear that there is absolutely nothing they can do there. So it's something you can go into, but you have to manipulate things from a distance, which is what happened in the original chamber as well. The only difference is, in the original chamber, if you jumped in, you would die because there was deadly water there. So I think that this has done most of what I planned for it. I really kind of like how it turned out, and I think that it's a bit easier to navigate than it was previously. If there are any significant errors that any of you find, please let me know. I'll see if I can't correct the map, fix it up. Otherwise, I enjoyed making the map. I can't say I've made anything original thus far, but I can say that I finally followed through, and on Christmas no less, recording on Christmas. I probably released 2 episodes today. I can finally say that I followed through on my promise to remake the map. So, hope you guys enjoy the higher quality video now. New 1080p recordings are forthcoming. This has been PA, and I'll see you all next time for more Perpetual Testing. Happy holidays.